Good evening, guys. Let me see if I can get this to play. Perfect. So, tonight I'm going to be talking to you guys about experiential learning. So, just to begin with, a little bit about why I chose experiential learning. The main reason I chose to look this up and research it a little bit more is because of my own personal experience with hands on learning. I'm also using the experiential learning theoretical framework for my thesis research that I'll be conducting in the fall, and I just wanted to know a little bit more about how the theory works as a whole, as well as how Extension uses the theory. I also just feel that it's important for educators to understand the different ways students learn and how using an experiential learning model can be helpful to students who may struggle more in a traditional classroom setting. So let's just dive right in. What is experiential learning? To put it simply, experiential learning is the idea of learning by doing. Kolb, who we'll mention a lot, kind of introduced this idea and is the one credited with a lot of the information that we have about experiential learning today. The main difference between experiential learning and the more conventional learning models that we are used to in classroom settings is the emphasis it places on hands-on learning. So I just kind of thought that this image was a good example of that, right? These students are using their hands and they're learning these scientific concepts while they're actually doing the work themselves, not just reading it out of a book. So why does Extension need to use the experiential learning model? Extension has practiced the idea of hands-on learning for decades now. Baker et al. Wrote that experiential learning has been key to the success of extension teaching methods. And something that I personally thought was really cool is that the 4-H slogan is actually learn by doing. This is to me is a very clear example of experiential learning's impact on cooperative extension. I mean, their 4-H slogan is essentially the whole concept behind experiential learning, right? Learn by doing. Hands-on activity, being immersed in that activity and actually taking part in it is the whole concept behind 4-H and experiential learning. So I think that that's really cool correlation to make and to see that connection there. So my problem statement is experiential learning still relevant and useful, specifically for extension specialists today? And then down here, I included this graphic that I found of the experiential learning cycle. So kind of how it takes place is you're in the moment experiencing these things. After the fact, you take time to meaningfully reflect upon what you experienced, and then you take time and you think about what you experienced as well as what you came up with when you were reflecting upon those experiences, and then you act again, and it goes over and over and over again. So I think that that's really cool as well. Just a nice little visual to look at. So our learning objectives for this presentation will be to understand all of the pieces of Kolb's experiential learning model, understand how experiential learning can be used in agricultural classrooms and settings, acknowledge some of the weaknesses of experiential learning, and finally make educated conclusions and recommendations regarding the use of experiential learning in extension and agriculture as a whole. So we're going to break down experiential learning just a little bit more. Experiential learning emphasizes the hands-on learning along with post-activity reflection. Kolb, like I said, introduced this theory, and in his paper that he wrote about it, there's 3 models of experiential learning discussed. The Luminian model of action research and laboratory training, Dewey's model of learning, and forgive me if I butcher this name, Paget's model of learning and cognitive development. The Luminian model we'll talk about first. It emphasizes the here and now solid experience to prove and test abstract concepts. The key piece of this model is the experience that's happening right now. So in other words, this piece of this model specifically emphasizes the experience that's happening right now as opposed to the reflection that'll take place after the fact. Kolb wrote that by using this model, researchers can give life, texture, and subjective personal meaning to abstract concepts and at the same time provide a concrete publicly shared reference point for testing the implications and validity of ideas created during the learning process. This model also places a large amount of emphasis on the feedback process, so it kind of mirrors that of electrical engineers. In other words, it places a lot of emphasis on how you change after you act and the reaction that you have to your own actions or what your actions caused. Kolb wrote that this process described how a social learning and problem-solving process that generates valid information to assess deviations from desired goals. So this model also provided the basis for a continuous process, like I said, that feedback process of goal-oriented action and evaluation of the consequences to that action. So like I said, the idea of feedback, right? So your goal-oriented action as well as how you react to the consequences of your own actions. Second, we'll talk about Dewey's model of learning. The main difference between this model and Lewin's model is that this one more clearly states the developmental nature of learning. Dewey also emphasized the idea that emotions and desires that take place during experiences lead to higher order purposeful action. Oh, excuse me. To put it in more relevant terms, his model makes it clear that people must think about what they have done and reflect upon their thoughts, feelings, and actions to achieve meaningful purpose in learning. So his model places a lot of emphasis on that reflection piece and truly achieving meaningful purpose in learning from the action that they took because they chose to take the time to actually reflect upon their action. And then the third and final model that was discussed in Kolb's paper is Paget's model of learning and cognitive development. Paget said the dimensions of experience and concept, reflection, and action from the basic continua for development form the for development of adult thought. He believed that the way people experience, digest, and reflect upon experiences naturally progresses as they age. So he just kind of thought that as people get older, the way they experience, digest, and reflect upon the actions that they take and the things that they experience just naturally progresses. And to him, that natural progression included going from more concrete ideas to more abstract ideas as the person gets older. Experiential learning and agricultural education. So this is where we're just going to kind of move into the idea of how experiential learning is used in agricultural education. So Baker found that experiential learning is a critical component of a comprehensive agricultural education model. In order for experiential learning to be effective in agricultural settings, educators must be willing to create a purposeful experience and ask reflective questions. So, in other words, for this experiential learning model to truly be effective and accomplish the purpose that it sets out to, the educators that are taking or that are using this model must take the time to actually think about reflection questions, to ask those questions, and to give students time to think about those questions and address them after they have completed the action or gone through the course or whatever that process may look like for each individual educator. A study done by Bradford in 2019 conducted a study on 10th grade students which compared teaching methods and found that the students who participated in the experiential learning techniques had increased knowledge scores compared to others. So, just kind of breaking that down a little bit more, the study that he did found that the students who were exposed to experiential learning techniques and teaching methods ended up the course with higher knowledge scores than those who were not exposed to those experiential learning techniques and methods. So, experiential learning can also be used in non traditional classroom settings. So, this is kind of where I see experiential learning interacting with extension and truly being useful for them there. Frank et al. Used experiential learning in the form of cooking classes to help lower income individuals learn about healthy eating and nutrition. So, they were able to teach these individuals about how to have proper nutrition, how to eat healthy through the idea of a hands on cooking class. And that's something that I think is really important for extension specialists to keep in mind, the fact that they can use things like cooking classes to make the learning more fun and more interactive, especially when we're working with adults. And then Rothenberger and Stewart conducted a study that examined the effectiveness of using greenhouse lab experiences as tools for horticulture courses. They found that the students who participated in the greenhouse labs had significantly higher post-test scores than those who did not. Though I do love the experiential learning model, and think that it has an immense amount of uses, it also has a few potential weaknesses. The two that I found were that there are two aspects of experiential learning that are used less often and less consistently. So the first is the inclusion of active experimentation activities, and the second is activities involving the transformation of information. So this just shows that not all aspects of experiential learning are always applicable. So, the conclusions that I was able to draw after doing my research: experiential learning is absolutely still a valuable tool for extension specialists today. Extension specialists have proved the effectiveness of experiential learning techniques within their programs time and time again. And then one that I think is especially relevant to talk about right now is the fact that despite technological advancements, I believe experiential learning techniques will remain relevant for years to come. It's my opinion that no matter how advanced technology gets, no matter how much we can do on a computer, there will always be value in learning by doing, by taking the time to go outside and participate in activities that help you truly understand what you're learning. And then finally, the recommendations that I would make after this research. After extensive research, I recommend that extension professionals continue to base their programs on the experiential learning model. Shoulders and Myers, 2013, recommended that more research be conducted to determine other ways experiential learning can be used in agricultural laboratories. Bradford recommended continual research be done to determine if experiential learning is still more effective than classroom learning. And Baker et al. Recommended research be done to address the long term effects of experiential learning techniques. I think that one thing most of these recommendations all have in common is that experiential learning is still a valuable tool and that we just need to continually re examine the ways we're using it and how effective it is in the ways we're using it in order to make sure that we are doing the best we can by the students that we are educating. And I think that experiential learning can always, like I said, be an effective tool for that, no matter what technological innovations may come about in the next few years. And then to wrap up, here are my reference pages. So awesome. Thank you guys so much.